This is in support of Speech 1300. It's completely crafted by ETSU faculty, and it wants to help you understand how to listen so others will talk and how to talk so that others will listen. So it's a two-way street, but it's going to focus on listening. What is listening is the first thing we'll talk about. Then we'll talk about some of the problems in the listening situation and what you can do about them. How can you talk so others will listen is also a telling point here. This is our sort of segue from receiving to sending. What is this listening? Well, I've gone over this, as did the textbook author, that it's the process as defined by the International Listening Association, the process of receiving, constructing meaning from, retaining and responding to verbal and or nonverbal signals. Much of this is somewhat redundant with the previous one, so you may wish to glide over those points, but I do urge you to remain focused and pay attention to the differences. Receiving, once again, if you listen to the other listening support tape, it includes many other sensory inputs as well. Sight, we listen not only with our ears but with our eyes as well. And we can and do choose what we're going to listen to, what we're going to attend. Constructing meaning is placing what we hear in the context of our maps of reality, our pictures of how the world functions. What does that mean? Well, it doesn't mean anything in isolation. It always means something in a context. Retention is important, but it is not just the recall of information, but rather it's the placing and keeping of information in short and long-term memory stores. Responding is both overt and covert. By that I mean not only do we do things externally like applaud when we hear a good speech, but also we do things internally, hidden, covert. And this responding is very much like what meaning meant to many meaning theorists, which was the overt and covert response to something. That's what means to the receiver. Another definition that I really like, Julia Woods, this came, but I thought from her book, but I thought you meant Misunderstandings in Human Communication, Mountain View, California, in 1998. It's the listening process from the Chinese way of thinking. We listen with our ears, but also the Chinese in their wisdom say we listen with our eyes. And a good listener has undivided attention. In other words, focuses on that which they wish to hear. And with the heart, we empathize. We try to feel, intuit what the other person is saying, as well as listen to it. How do you tell if somebody is listening to you? It really matters a lot. Well, here are some of the indications of what effective listeners do. We know that effective listeners, people when they're paying attention, nod their head. And we don't mean that means they're going to sleep, but rather they're probably in agreement. They are visibly expressive. They actually move their facial muscles, their lips, their eyes, their eyebrows. They make, oh, wow, is that it? Yeah, yeah, yeah. They sit up straight. They don't slouch. If I asked you to pretend you were listening well, you would probably sit up straight, probably nod your head. You already know many of these things because you lived with them. We maintain eye contact. As I've mentioned before, our eyes are like the gatekeepers, are the traffic lights. When we're listening, we have a tendency to maintain eye contact. When we're speaking and we're close to a person, we have a tendency to break eye contact and look to the right and the left. We only maintain eye contact as speakers if we're 12 or more feet away from a person, or if we're within 18 inches of a person in intimate space. Then we're either fighting or making love. Farther away, we're giving public speeches. In between, in social and personal space, is when the eye contact starts to be one of the characteristics of a listener rather than a speaker. And you move more. A man by the name of Thistlethwaite created what he called the wiggle meter. And he wired up some seats, and he found that when people were interested in a speech, they wiggled more, they moved in their seats more than if they didn't. So people move more, and they blink their eyelids more frequently. Now, this is an interesting nonverbal that we've looked at in a number of different ways. There was one study that suggested that people who were listening better blinked their eyelids more frequently. We also said the people who were telling the truth blink their eyelids less frequently. So we don't know for sure what eye blinks always mean, but it's one indication. Another indication is expanded pupils. When people are interested, their pupils expand. Now, are you listening to them? Well, by attending to the same nonverbal cues from their advice, they can tell you if you are listening. If you pay attention to your own cues, you can tell if you're listening. Well, that does make sense. Of course I know if I'm listening. Well, not really. If you attend to where you're paying attention, if you do all the symptomatic things of a good listener, some theorists hold that you then will, at your core, listen more empathetically and better. Now, why do people not listen to you, or why do you not listen to them? It could be a physiological problem. Listening takes energy, and sometimes we're just too tired to listen. Sometimes parents think, well, I can't really pay attention to the person, but I have to pretend that I'm listening. Sometimes students do this too in class. We're just too tired to listen to the professor. Listening is hard work. Paying attention to everything a person says is hard work. And so you sometimes have to be physiologically ready to listen. It could also be a physiological problem with your hearing. About 10% of the United States population has hearing loss, significant hearing loss. Those people typically know who they are and they do things about it, but that can be a problem as well. Could be a psychological problem, and I've mentioned before that I think psychological noise is the most insidious because we often can't tell that such a problem exists. Bias. How do we know we have bias? Well, typically we think we're not biased. We think we're seeing things as they are, and so bias is a problem, and the bias can be of any number of different varieties. Language too. The language we have, that which we understand, may influence how effective we are in hearing. We tend not to listen to people who have erudite language. We tend to listen to people who speak our language, who say things the way we say them. Is it Appalachia or Appalachia? Is it Caribbean or Caribbean? Is it Himalayas or Himalayas? Is it pianist or pianist? How do you pronounce these various words? What's the correct pronunciation? Well, the correct pronunciation is the way your audience pronounces it, or at least the way you should pronounce it, the way that they think or expect it to be pronounced in order to get the effect that you wish. If you want to say duck and they're from China and you want them to duck your head, it's probably not going to be a very effective way. I don't know what you'd say in Chinese to do that, but using an English word probably wouldn't be appropriate. You have to do what's appropriate for your audience. You have to adapt and adjust to your audience. It could also be a physical problem. There often is, well, there always is some noise in the channel, but there often is noise that could prevent you from hearing effectively. And so what you have to do is block out that physical noise. You can either cut it out, you can be redundant, you can try to move closer to the speaker. There's any number of different things you can do for for physical problems. Physical problems also include how busy the environment is. We have moved in many of our early childhood classrooms from gaily decorated rooms to very plain rooms. It seems that hyperactive children especially, and name a child, many of them are very active. When you have a very busy classroom with pictures and signs and colors, it could be too busy for them. And so there's some people who feel that what we should do is keep the kindergarten classroom simple, the preschool classroom simple. And it's interesting how this relates also to the Alzheimer's. People with dementia, starting to get dementia, they find that they also cannot pay attention because there's too many stimuli. And one of the ways to help them is to not dumb down, but simplify the environment. Don't have a whole lot of pictures all over. Don't have a lot of things for them to tend to, and they can probably focus their attention where you want them to be. Well, the same holds true for the middle of the roaders, the rest of us, who are not juveniles or babies and are not quite yet into dementia. Maybe it would be better if we simplified the environment. Certainly, in a classroom situation, that if there are things happening outside and there's a window and you can look out on a beautiful spring day or an autumn day or any sort of a day, it can be distracting. What are the power indicators? Interestingly, in communication situations, there can be power. We find that when we go into a office of a faculty member or administrator or a boss in any person who has power over you, you can find out whether or not they think they have power over you. Look at the size of the desk. Where do they place your chair and theirs? We have a really neat president who sits behind a huge, big desk. But when you come into his office, he'll often get out from behind his desk and come over and sit in an easy chair next to one that he offers to you. So there's no barriers in between you. So look for power barriers, whether or not the person wishes to have one. But often another way to get people to listen more effectively, if you have power over them, is to put some sort of symbolic power barrier between you two. People feel first, of course, that there is power, that a desk or some divide between you does mean power, but it also means safety. This is why we feel a little more comfortable when we go to the library and sit next to people if we put an imaginary wall between us, maybe built of books or pencils or other bric-a-brac. What are the time limitations? Physical problem, many times people are too stressed, too many things to do, and they can't listen effectively because there's not enough time. There's too much information to take in too little time. How comfortable is the arrangement? The temperature for best thought is around 67 degrees. Most of our classrooms are not 67 degrees, and most of our business environments are not 67 degrees. How comfortable the arrangement is the speaking arrangement is important to how effectively people will listen. The environment does not have to be loud, be called a noisy one. Any sort of things can intrude into the environment. If you are wearing jewelry and it swings back and forth when you speak, or if you have this habit of moving the podium side to side, these things can be in the environment and they can be noisy. How can I talk so others will listen? Also includes physiological problems. And here are some suggestions I'm going to run through. Number one, make every effort to eliminate extraneous noise, both oral and visual. So don't give them anything to concentrate on that isn't part of your speech. If you're giving a public speech, for instance. I had a student who once gave a public speech about gymnastics, and she brought her sister in, her 14-year-old sister, who was a regional master at this. And the sister did backflips and forward flips, and it was really wonderful. But we didn't hear a word the person said. We couldn't hear. We were too fascinated and too enamored with this person behaving so wonderfully well gymnastically. But we couldn't tell what the speech was about. I had another person who did body painting, and he brought his girlfriend in, and he had her in a bikini, and he would show body painting on her. And believe me, it was very difficult to pay attention to that. With that visual distraction. Increase the intensity of important stimuli to drown out competing stimuli. We speak a little louder. We move closer to the listener. We get a better signal on the radio. Or we remove barriers between the two. Remember we said earlier that when we listen with our eyes. And so if I can allow you to see my face, I have a much more effective communication because I have redundancy built in. Be sure they can see your face. is important. Rearrange the furniture, the environment if need be. Maintain visual contact. You as a speaker, if you're more than 14 feet away, 12 to 14 feet away, should keep in visual contact of the person. I tell people to skim over a class long enough to tell whether or not a person is listening, long enough to make eye contact with the person. It keeps their attention. Be brief. People can't take in lots of stuff at once. Long sequences of commands and advice may be too much to attend to. One or two or three things at a time. How many things can you study at a time? Some people suggest you should only study one thing at a time, pause a couple hours, then study something else. If you have the time to do it, that's the way to go about it. There are also psychological problems. Psychological problems include being unwilling to listen. People are either willing or unwilling to listen. I don't particularly care what you say is, if you will, a state, but there's also a trait of people not caring to listen overall. Just like some people are reticent and don't want to speak, there are other people who are unwilling to listen, or they're not motivated. People will listen when you motivate them. Teachers have known for a long time that if I say, this is on the test, everybody will start taking notes. Or if I write it on the board, everybody will take notes. You can motivate people in a lot of ways, but realize what you have to do is figure out how an individual is motivated. What will capture the attention of this person? What do they want to know? People don't listen to you because they don't like you. Now, I don't know, I hope you've never run into this before, but the fact of the matter is we listen to people we like. One of the oldest schools of thought is the Aristotelian logic school that suggests that people listen for three reasons, or are persuaded by three things: ethos, pathos, and logos. And ethos is the speaker. And modern theorists have broken that down into a number of different categories, but we find that ethos, or source credibility, is made up of three elements. One is how much you know, or expertise. Two is whether I trust you. And three is whether you're dynamic. Now, there are many other ways of looking at it, but studies by a number of theorists too have found that people do things for people most likely because they like you. And one of the things they'll do for you is they'll pay attention to you. The fourth problem might be they don't understand your words. We've done studies and we found that reading ability and grades are highly correlated. By that I mean, not that the better readers get always the better grades, that probably is the case, but rather the reading level of your textbook is directly correlated with your grade point. If people read on a level with the textbook, so if you read at an 11th grade level and it's 11th grade textbook, your grade point will be one full grade point higher than if the textbook is at a 12th or collegiate level and you read it at 11th grade level. So words really are important for you to understand. The speaker should know this, and he should use, or she should use, words that you can understand. One reason people don't listen to you also is because you're apprehensive. I'm scared that I won't understand. I'm scared that he'll persuade me. I'm scared that he'll make me do something, so I won't listen to him. I'm scared he'll tell me something bad, so I won't ask him the question. We're too apprehensive. The receiver apprehension test, which you take as a diagnostic in the class, will tell you whether you're too apprehensive. Some apprehension is good because it alerts you, it arouses you, it gets you ready to listen. Or you have an inappropriate listening style. We talked in another presentation on Chapter 5 about listening styles. And if I'm listening for relationships and you're speaking to give me content, I'm going to have a problem. So people don't listen effectively because they have adopted the wrong style. Here are some suggestions. Be redundant. Not only repeating the oral message, but also presenting complementary and supporting messages visually and non-verbally. Write on the board, gesture, make every attempt to internally summarize your speeches. People will understand, will listen to you better. Empathize with the listener. As a speaker, you should empathize with the listener. What's the best way to get through to this person? Zig Ziglar, a famous salesman, wrote about closing the deal. And he thought it was tantamount that you understand the listener. And he felt that if he knew the listener, he could make a sale. Make listeners responsible for attending. Why don't people listen to me? Well, they don't listen to you because they figure it's your duty to entertain them. It's not their duty to pay attention. And what you have to do is shift that responsibility back to the listener. It is the listener's ultimate responsibility for listening. He or she has to attend to you. And what you have to do is make them want to do that. Famous Steve McQueen line was when he was asked, why did the man jump into the field full of naked? Why did the man jump naked into a field full of cactus? He responded, because at the time he thought it was the right thing to do. Why do people listen to you? Because at the time they think that's the right thing to do. Why don't people listen to you? Because at the time they didn't think it was the right thing to do. We tend to not know all the time when it's important. So you as a speaker can get people to listen by saying, this is important. This will be on the test. I'm going to ask you about this tomorrow. Be specific. Break down instructions, advice into simple, concise, concrete actions. When you go to see somebody and ask for something, say, this is what I want, and be very specific. People who are listening to you then can focus in and figure out your message much more easily. Slow down your rate of presentation. The typical person speaks from 135 to 150 words a minute. However, I've had any number of students who have written out 3 to 5 minute speeches that have lasted 2 minutes. Why? Because they tend to speak a lot faster sometimes when they're nervous. The typical person speaks 130 to 150 words or thereabouts a minute. The typical typed page has around 300 words on it. So if you actually wrote out your speech, and I'm not advocating that at all, that would be, and it was 2 pages long, that would be 600 words. That would be around 4 minutes long. People, however, can speak up to 200 words a minute. So you have to worry about it because that could be reduced to a 3-minute speech. But slowing your rate allows for more time for processing and understanding of information. Use corrective feedback to tune the listener. So if they're not paying attention, make eye contact with them. Use silence to draw their attention to you. Check and recheck for attention. Time the message well. Don't tell bad things just before the picnic. Don't have an important meeting at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Figure out when people are going to pay attention. Remember, physiologically speaking, sometimes we're better off in one part of the day than another. Some people are morning people, some are afternoon, some are evening people. Time the message well in terms of rhythms, the body rhythms of the other person. But also realize that people have a hard time understanding late in the day, or at least a harder time. I went to did summer school up in Quebec to learn French, and at the beginning of the day I could understand quite a bit of French very nicely. In the middle of the day it was a little harder, and in the evening, forget it. Use sign language, but French was a foreign language to me then. Give the thesis early on. What I'm going to tell you is this. Once again, the key to effective communication is to create an expectation and then meet it. Well, giving the thesis early on tells the people what you're going to do, and they do listen with purpose. They often will listen much more intently to you and will perhaps agree with you as well. Make the material worthwhile. Once again, people listen to those things that they think are going to be important. So don't make it a mystery until the very end of the speech whether people should have listened. Now, don't you wish you had listened to this because I've just told you? No, tell them in advance why they should listen. Share yourselves. Let others know how you think. Then they can empathize. A very famous study looked at grade point averages for students. And what they wanted to find out was if whether or not their mode of thinking influenced grades. And they got people of relatively the same intelligence. They balanced people through their IQ and GPA. And then they took them with teachers and they said, how would Mr. Jones organize the following? And they give them maybe 5 cities: Chicago, LA, Detroit, New York, New Orleans. And maybe they say, okay, how would you organize those? And the students would figure out how they'd organize it. They may organize it from best to worst, from biggest to smallest. They might do it alphabetically. They might do it south to north or east to west. But they would organize these cities, and they had many other things too they organized, as they would. And then they said, all right, now how would your teacher, Mr. Jones, organize these? And then they asked Mr. Jones, how would you organize these? All right, so they had 3 measures. They had how the students organized, how the students thought Mr. Jones would organize, and how Mr. Jones organized. And they found that students who organized like Mr. Jones had a grade point average 1 full grade higher than those that did not organize as Mr. Jones. And further, students who could understand how Mr. Jones, or predict effectively how Mr. Jones would organize, would have the same grade point average as people who did organize the same way. If you can empathize with your professor or with the person who's speaking, you'll know how to listen to what they're saying. You'll understand the important parts. And speakers should understand if they share with others how they organize, what they think is important, what their worldview is, others then can empathize more effectively with them. Assess the level of apprehension listeners have and adjust the worth factor accordingly. People get worried. They're apprehensive about listening. Well, one thing that makes that even more apprehensive is if what they're listening to is important. So doing something may cause anxiety, but doing something that's really critical will raise anxiety even more. So we can adjust how worthy what it is, and downplay perhaps the significance if people are really hyper. So if people get really scared at the concept of having to master concepts, try to reduce the scare factor. Try to reduce the worth of what you're saying. Now, it sounds counterintuitive. It sounds different than what we said before. But what we're saying is there is an optimal value that is not intrinsic necessarily in the information you're giving. It is what appears to the person receiving information. $1 to a poor person is probably as important as $10 is to somebody else, or $100 is to somebody else, or $1,000 is to somebody else. And so if there's a greater number of dollars for that poor person, if you will, they may get too flustered or too apprehensive about the whole situation. You have to adjust the worth of what you're sending depending upon the level of apprehension that you perceive the listeners have. Avoid emotional words. Trigger words really turn people off. And if they turn them on, trigger words can also excite them and make them too physiologically aroused. Remember, physiological arousal is really critical to the listening process, and it has to do with both understanding and retaining information. Too much arousal is bad. Too little arousal is bad. It's a curvilinear relationship, such that the more aroused you are, the better a listener you'll be, up to a point. And then the more aroused you are, the worse listener you'll be. So avoid emotional words for fear that you'll put them over the edge. Pay attention to your listener. Good listening is reciprocated. We tend to pay attention to people who would pay attention to us. If you have eye contact with me, I'll have eye contact with you. If you agree with me a lot, I'll tend to agree with you a lot. Analyze errors. We can always become better. Why did we do so well? Why did we do so poorly? Learn from both successes and failures. Suggestion 20. Make a firm commitment to listen. If we are committed, if we take responsibility for listening, we will and can listen more effectively. Get physically and mentally ready to listen. Remember, your physiological state is important. If you are not well rested, if you're too tired, you're not going to pay attention. Uh, People can use stimulants, Coca-Cola, caffeine. That will get you triggered and maybe get you a little over that hump, but you also have to be mentally ready to listen. You have to want to hear what this person says. You have to be purposeful in your listening. Concentrate on the speaker as a person, not a category, not an adversary, not a small creature or demon. He or she is trying to help you. And if you don't see that person as a person, if you don't try to empathize with that person, you won't listen as effectively. The jury's out now still on whether you should give the speaker a full hearing before evaluating the worth of the material. Some people aren't worthy to listen to. Why? If I had only not paid attention to some shyster who's trying to sell me some bill of goods, I could have saved myself hours of time. Try to evaluate a person, but realize, especially in the informative speech situation, you don't have to, when you're listening, agree with anything that a person says. Listening well is not synonymous with agreeing. A lot of people think that. A lot of people think he didn't listen well to me. And when you ask them why, because he didn't agree with me. He may have listened very well to you, may have attended very well, but he did not agree with you. And so, on the one hand, you should give a person full hearing with the realization that you don't have to agree with them. You just have to hear their point of view. But secondly, realize that some things early on are so full of garbage that you can stop listening and turn them off. Analyze your intent and attempt to discover what you think is valuable. What are you really in this for? Is it information, time, people, action, relationships? It really makes a difference how you listen depending on what you want to get out of the listening. Take notes, not transcripts. It's amazing. If we record a speech, chances are we won't listen to it. We don't have to. We have the tape recording. One of the worst mistakes I made was with my second child. When he was born, I took a camera into the delivery room and I took pictures from every point of view. I hadn't done that with my daughter. And today I can close my eyes and see what happened in the delivery room with my daughter. I know every second of it. With my son, I can't, because I took pictures. I didn't have to. People are intuitively, if not lazy, but efficient. We don't listen when we don't have to. If I take copious notes, I don't have to listen to you. It just comes in the ear and goes down the arm and out the pen. So take brief notes, not transcripts, that will aid your memory, not replace it. Figure out the speaker's organizational pattern. I told you that people who organize like a speaker or can figure out his organizational pattern will do a lot more effectively than people who can't and don't. Give the speaker honest feedback, not delusional feedback. Don't say, "Oh, great, great, great. I didn't pay attention to him at all." Don't. I'm a big perpetrator of false feedback here. When I was in college, I would shake my head and take notes, apparently, and the professor thought I was paying attention. Indeed, I was writing home, "Hey, Mom, this guy thinks I'm paying attention to him, but I'm not." Well, I lost. He didn't lose. But I gave him dishonest feedback. As a result, he was a very boring speaker, I thought, and as a result, he continued his boring ways because he thought he was getting through to me and the other people in the class because we were all giving him what he thought to be positive feedback. Speakers will adapt and adjust to feedback you give them. So give them honest feedback. Now, you don't have to throw things at them if you don't like them. There's a lot of things you can do that are more subtle than that. But don't give false feedback, because what it'll do is it will have him continue on bad behaviors. Let's pay attention to your own listening behavior. You can tell when you're drifting off. We take micro vacations after about 10 minutes of a presentation. You've probably had to stop this tape several times. I tried this in a class once. Every time people started drifting off and I rang a bell, they were to raise their hand. And any one particular time throughout the whole semester that I did this, about 20% of the people raised their hand. And a few other percent said, oh, I wasn't paying attention, the bell rang, so I didn't raise my hand. I should have. What I'm suggesting is you have to attend your own listening behavior. You have to be your own gatekeeper. People can't tell you you're not listening. You have to tell yourself that. Strive to bring the quality of your habitual listening up to the level of your optimal capacity. What's that mean? Well, all of us know intuitively that listening is hard. It can give you a headache if you do it too long and too hard. And so we pace ourselves. Now, how do we become better? Well, you listen to difficult material. You try to listen a little longer. It's like you're training for a long distance race. When you're training for the marathon, you may walk 3 minutes and then run a minute, then walk 3 minutes and run a minute, and then walk 2 minutes and run 2 minutes, and then walk 1 minute and run 3 minutes. You build yourself up. You get into a more efficient pattern of running the marathon. Well, the same thing holds true with listening. We tend to listen at a lower level. We pay attention for cues in the environment that we should pay more attention. And this happens with all sorts of cognitive processes. We pace ourselves. That pacing self is habitual. That's what we do day in and day out. That's the level we don't have to worry about. Some people are blessed with the ability to have a very high habitual level of listening, but the rest of us aren't. But we are capable of listening effectively when we have to. That's the optimal level. You're hanging from your fingertips, and below you is a 1,000-foot drop into jagged water covered with rocks and crocodiles scurrying all over them. Well, you know, and I'm trying to tell you how to get your feet up on the bank and get over and be safe. You'll probably listen very effectively to me. That's your optimal capacity. Now, wouldn't it be nice if you always had that optimal capacity? Wouldn't it be nice that if you could listen without as much effort and retain information? People can do that. But what you have to do is train yourself by practicing. I maintain that you can get a lot more bang for your buck bringing your habitual level up to your optimal level than trying to work on your optimal level. A lot of people, when pressured, can listen well for a little bit. Wouldn't it be nice if we could always listen that well without trying? And suggestion 30, analyze your listening errors so you can become better the next time. Also analyze your successes. Why did you listen so effectively in this situation? What did you do differently? Try to figure that out and you'll be a much better listener. To be competent, and that's what we want you to be, you have to know what to do to listen effectively in a variety of situations. You have to have knowledge. You have to have skill. You have to demonstrate you can listen effectively in a variety of situations. And finally, you have to want to listen. And you can either want to listen because you're very willing to listen, or you can be apprehensive and scared about listening because you're scared of what will happen if you do listen.